Hello, welcome to another week. We're going to continue our work on fractions, decimals and percentages today. And today we're going to look at a question where we have to put fractions, decimals and percentages in order. Okay, so first of all, for our starters, we're going to be reminding ourselves what we've been doing last week. So changing into a percentage. So if we've got a decimal and we need to change it to a percentage, remember what we need to do is multiply by 100. So we need to move all these digits 2 places to the left, and that would put the 8 in front of the point and the 3 after the point. So it's 8.3%. Okay, and then 7/8. So if we want to change that to a percentage, then we'd be better to change it to a decimal first. And remember, you do 7 divided by 8 to change it into a decimal. So 8 into 7 goes no times, with 7 left over. 8 into 70, well, 8 times 8 is 64, so we'd have 6 left over. 8 into 60 goes 7 times, and 8 sevens is 56, so we've got 4 left over. And then 8 into 40 goes 5 times. So we've got 0.875 as a decimal. So when we change that to a percentage, we multiply by 100. So that means that the 8 and the 7 are then going to be in front of the decimal point. So it'll be 87.5%. Okay, so we're ordering decimals, fractions and percentages now. So let's start by considering these 3 questions. Which is bigger? So we can't tell that just by looking at it. Okay, we can know that 3/8 is a bit less than a half because 4/8 is a half, but 39% is also a bit less than a half, so it's not easy to tell. So we need to have them in the same form. Okay, so we can either change everything into fractions, everything into decimals, or everything into percentages. Okay, and what I would start by is changing 3/8 into a decimal to begin with. Okay, so remember 3/8 is 3 divided by 8, like we just did with the 7/8. So 8 into 3 goes no times, carry 3. 8 into 30 goes 3 times, and 3/8 are 24, so we've got 6 left over. 8 into 60 goes 7 times, which is 56, so we've got 4 left over, and then 8 into 40 goes 5 times. So now we should be able to see which one's bigger, either by changing the percentage to a decimal or the decimal to a percentage. So let's change the decimal to a percentage, because I think that's probably easier when we get onto the other things. So remember, to change a decimal into a percentage, you're multiplying by 100. So this is, Stacey? So this is 37.5%. So the answer is that 39% is bigger than 3/8 because 3/8 is 37.5%. Okay, let's do the same thing with the 5/9 and the 56%. So let's say 5 divided by 9. So 9 into 5 doesn't go, carry the 5. 9 into 50 goes 5 times. 5 9s are 45, so we've got 5 left over. 9 into 50 goes 5 times, again 45, so we've got 5 left over. And we can see that that's just going to keep going, isn't it? So this is 0.555555, and if we change that into a percentage, it would be 55.5 recurring percent, or 55.55555. So we can see that 56% is just a tiny bit bigger than that. Okay, and then the last one, 0.28 or 7/20. So we're going to do the same again. We need to change, whichever way you do this, whether you compare them as decimals or percentages, I wouldn't recommend changing them to fractions. You you still need to work out the fraction as a decimal. That's going to be your first step. Okay, so 20 into 7 doesn't go. Carry the 7. 20 into 70 goes 3 times with 10 left over. And 20 into 100 goes 5 times. So 7/20 is 0.35. So we don't need to change these into percentages. We can just look at them and say that we know that 0.35 is bigger than 0.28. So in this case, it was 7/20 that's bigger. Okay, so if we're asked which one's bigger, the correct answer is not 0.35 because that wasn't one of our original options. You do some work to find out that 7/20 is bigger. Okay, so we're going to do the same sort of thing but in a slightly larger scale now, because we've got 5 things here that we're going to put in order, smallest first. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is change the fractions into decimals. All right, so we're going to do 5/8 and we're going to do 13/20. All right, so if we just quickly do these, 8 into 50, remember, goes 6 times, 6/8 48, so we've got 2 left over. 8 into 20 goes twice, that's 16, with 4 left over. So 8 into 40 goes 5. So 5/8 is 0.625. Okay, 13/20 then, 20 into 13 doesn't go. So we're carrying 13. 20 into 130 would go 6 times with 10 left over. So now we've got 20 into 100 goes 5 times. So the 13/20 is 0.65. So we can either now change that 1% into a decimal and compare them, or we can change them all to percentages. Okay, I think changing them all to percentages probably makes it easier, but if you want to stick with decimals, that's fine. It doesn't take a minute to change these into percentages because we're just multiplying the decimals by 100. So we've got 62.5%, 63.8%, 65% and 64%. Okay, so putting those in order, smallest first, well, we can see that 62.5 is the smallest out of all those percentages. So we can say that 5/8 is the smallest number. But remember, we don't say that 62.5 is the smallest because that's not what we started with. You've got to go with your originals. Okay, but also you have to be able to see your working. If you try and do this with no working, you'll get no marks because you could have just guessed. Okay, so we've got that one, the 62.5%. Right, so next we've got a 63.8%. So that was 0.638 that we started with. Then next, look at that, we've got 64% and 0.64. They're both the same, aren't they? So we'll put them together because they're equal. And then it must be that the last one is a 65%. So that's the 13/20. So we've put those in order, smallest first, but as it turned out, the 64% and the 0.64 were the same size as each other. So now we're just going to practice that a little bit more. So first one, if we have a look, we've got 0.3, a fifth, a half, 0.706, 7/8 and 57.1%. So we need to change our fractions into decimals to start with. So I'm not going to go through the detail of how we do it because you don't need to sit and listen whilst we do that every time. Okay, so a fifth is 0.2. A half we know is 0.5. And 7/8, we have done that several times. We could look back. In fact, was that not one of the starter questions today? Yep, 87.5%. So we can just go straight to percentage if we want with that. We can go 87.5, since we've already found that out. So if we express all these as percentages now, because again, I think that's easier to do that. So 0.3 is 30%. A fifth would be 20%. A half is 50%. Remember, we're multiplying by 100, so this is 70.6%, 87.5%, and 57.1%. So which one of those is the smallest? Well, let's just look at the percentages. So the 20% is the smallest, so that's a fifth. Then the next smallest is the 30%, so that's 0.3. Then the next smallest is the 50%, so that started off as a half. Then we're up to the 57.1%. And then we've got 70.6 is the next one, so that's 0.706. And then the last one is 87.5%, so that's your 7/8. Okay, and then we'll do the other one. So, again, we're going to change them all to percentages. So let's start by changing the fractions to decimals. Okay, or percentages. So we know that a quarter is 25%. We know that a fifth is 20%, so 3/5 must be 60%. Now 2/3, if we work out 2/3, basically what we get is that. Okay, so that would be 66.6 recurring percent. This last one here, the 0.824, if we express that as a percentage, it's 82.4%. The 38.5% is already a percentage. And 0.9 as a percentage is 90% when we multiply by 100. So, putting these in order then, the smallest one is the 25%. So we write down a quarter to start with. Then the next smallest one is the 38.5%. The next one was the 60%, so that's the 3/5. Then the next one is the 66.6666%, so that's the 2/3. Then we've got the 82.4%, so we write down 0.824 because that's what we started with. And then the last one is 90%, and we were given that as 0.9. Okay, so if we need to put fractions and decimals and percentages in order, then either change them all to decimals or all to percentages, but I do think that percentages are easier to compare than decimals, especially when you've got different numbers of decimal places. Okay, right, so well done. Have a go at the practice questions, and I'll see you tomorrow.